Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council informational meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Ready? Well, good afternoon, everyone. We will call this informational meeting for June 12th to order. And our first order of business is open discussion. Anybody?
Chairman?
Yes, Councilor Brecky.
I have an item for open discussion.
Okay.
I'm going to hand it out. It's an ordinance proposal that is a compromise position on the public input ordinance that has currently been presented to the council and is up for first reading tonight. My intent in introducing this ordinance is I think it does a better job of dealing with both sides of this issue, and I'm going to deal with it in a different way. One of my frustrations in the current process is how the ordinance that's up for first reading tonight came on to first reading tonight. We had an informational meeting, we had an operations committee meeting, both at which part of the agenda items were to discuss public input, and this item was not brought up at all at either of those meetings, so I'm very frustrated with the way that it's put on without collaborating with the full council. So for my ordinance, I'm just handing it out tonight to you and any members of the public that want one, and I've placed it on an informational meeting for June 19th, and it will have a first reading for June 19th as well. So this will give the council an opportunity to collaborate on this issue, and it will give them other choices in addition to the one that will be on the agenda for second reading that night.
I might ask for just a bit of clarification, Jim. Are we following proper, is this how we're doing this? How do we do it, or? Okay.
I would make one additional note. It was supposed to be in red, the changes, but if you look closely, they're highlighted, they're italicized. So I didn't want to burn up any more paper for it, but where it's you have to look closely for the italicized, and that's the proposed amendment.
Okay, Councilor Staley.
Ed, I want to say thank you to Councilor Brecky for bringing up a compromise, because, and of course, we'll be talking about this again tonight at 7 o'clock, but we just had a legislative mandate for some of you who follow City Council business, but the legislature has mandated that every meeting, public meeting, has some sort of public input allowance for that. And so in preparing for that, we had a presentation by our city attorney. And then we decided to have a working session, which we did a few weeks ago. We sat around here, we threw ideas out about what might work. Councilor Sale here had a great idea of feedback from his experience. We threw it out, we talked about it, public could hear it, and actually now moving ahead, the public will be able to come at that meeting, this meeting, and speak. And then we sent it to the operations committee last week, I believe, and they talked about our ideas. And they're going to be bringing forth what they've come up with as a recommendation. That is called due process. That is called transparency. And that is what should have happened with what we're going to be talking about tonight, this effort to move our input to the back of the meeting without any talk within the council or within the public. And to me, it's like taking a little sliver. You got a problem, and the way you deal with it is you cut the whole arm off. That isn't how we do things in Sioux Falls. So I'm so appreciative that Councilor Brecky has taken it upon herself to look for some compromises now, and so that we're going to do the best due diligence for our citizens, because they are the most important order of business, in my opinion. So thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Neitzer.
Without commenting on this proposal, I would say that the process is to pass an ordinance. You have to bring an ordinance to a first and a second reading. I brought an ordinance forward recently that was a transportation ordinance, and I went to a first and second reading, and I followed the process. So if following the legal process is somehow a violation of due process, then our process apparently really stinks, and we apparently need to change it or something. But we bring ordinances all the time for a first and second reading. We have a first reading, we can have a discussion, it'll go a week, we have got lots of input from the public, I'm getting lots of input, and then we'll have even more input at a second reading, and then we can make a decision. But I'm not sure how you violate due process by following the law. So,
Anybody else?
Yes, Mr.
Councilor
Chair.
Starr.
Yesterday at lunch at the Kiwanis Club I belong to, I had a chance to hear our Sheriff Milstead speak about drugs in our community and what he's seen on a county level, as well as working closely with the Sioux Falls Police Department. One of the things that he talked a lot about was citizens not locking their vehicles when they have firearms in their car and not securing the weapons. Our sheriff's begged, our police chief has been more than outspoken about begging for citizens to lock their vehicles and to make sure that if they do have a weapon in their vehicle, that it is properly secured. 4 separate instances this weekend, we've had citizens who had firearms stolen from their vehicles because they didn't have their cars locked. And at some point, we keep talking about how do we improve crime, what do we do with drug abuse as it continues to grow and become epidemic levels, both as a nation, and we're seeing it here in Sioux Falls. And I think maybe we're at a point where we need to maybe increase the penalty for not securing weapons in their vehicles, and it may be something that I'm going to investigate over the coming weeks of what we can do as a city. We can ask, and at some point, we're contributing to the problem if we don't increase the penalty possibly. And it may be time that we take a serious look at what we do of how we can maybe solve this problem, because I don't know how much stronger we can ask the community to do the right thing. But over the last 10 to 12 days, it's been 8 different occurrences. And like I said, just for this weekend, and I don't know how much clearer that we can be without increasing a penalty at some point. And as you can tell, I'm angry about it. I'm angry about that people who aren't responsible with their Second Amendment rights. They need to step up and do the right thing. They're contributing to the problem. I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment, and I believe that people have the right to bear their arms. But at the same time, they have a responsibility that goes with that constitutional right to protect our community. And if we're not going to do it, and people aren't going to be responsible, then this body probably has a responsibility to take some action. And like I said, I wanted to start this discussion today, and it's unfortunate that we have to take a position that that maybe stronger enforcement is possible or required as we do this. And I'm going to learn a lot more about what's available, both from a penalty side and an encouragement side over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Starr. Anybody else? Councilor Staley?
And so, Councilor Selberg, I wanted to ask you, as our stand-in chair right now, with this other public input, and I know the Operations Committee met, when, and that has to be implemented on July 1st, is that correct, that the new change?
As far as what we met about in
Yeah,
our
no, I'm
working sessions?
wanting to just give an update to the public about how that's going to be unveiled to them.
The one that was turned over to you for the Operations Committee report?
Right.
Okay.
Can you tell the public where we're at with that?
Well, I think basically, I didn't know you wanted a breakdown, or I'd had more of a program ready, but I know that we pretty much met on what the changes probably will be and how we'll have those deal with both our informational meeting and our committee meetings. If I'm going off the top of my head, and I think some people can maybe add in. Did you have something to add?
Mr. Chairman, just that it's coming up later on our agenda. And Jim's going to make a presentation. I think all those questions could be
Okay, is
answered
that what
the
we're looking
process
for? I
is.
didn't know if I was
Okay.
being
Yeah,
quizzed or where we're.
I
okay.
think that's the item
Gotcha.
coming
Thank
up in a
you.
couple.
Okay, good. Anybody else for open discussion? Okay. Well, our first order of business, our first presentation, will be on the Georgetown University Certificate Program on Juvenile Justice. And I think we've got a few different presenters with us, so welcome.
Good afternoon. We're here today to talk about a project that we've been working on now close to a year from the time that we applied. It's a capstone report project that's been developed that was based on some training that a team of folks went to at Georgetown University out east. Thanks. The team that went is Judge Joni Cutler, and she's our current juvenile judge. She's here. We have Carol James. She's our senior deputy state's attorney, and she's in charge of all juvenile prosecution. Andrew Robertson is a public defender, and he does all of our juvenile cases, and he is not here, and he was at court. We have Sergeant Jason Leach from our Sioux Falls Police Department, and he is a sergeant of the school resource officers. Annie Brokenleg was our racial and ethnic fairness coordinator at the time of the application in this project, but she took a position as a statewide juvenile detention alternative initiative coordinator. So we have Rebecca Kiso-Knudsen from Lutheran Social Services here, who took her place in the project, and then myself, Erin Surska, who just acted as a coordinator to help support this team. I work for the Minnehaha County Commission. Georgetown University offers various certificate programs where you apply. It's a competitive process. You have to apply to go. Each person has to submit their credentials. It's competitive. You have to get accepted, and then each person has to pay to attend. They equate it to a graduate level course. We were made aware of this opportunity from the Council of Juvenile Services. They're a statewide entity that does juvenile justice, looks at juvenile justice issues, and they said, we have some funding, and would you be interested in applying and attending? So we put together the best team we had to put together an application, and they were accepted. There was 7 or 9 teams total, and there was lots of applications, so it's a big deal that we were able to go. It's a full week in the DC area, focused on training, looking at reducing racial and ethnic disproportionalities and disparities in the juvenile justice system. I'll let the team talk more about the specific training opportunities they had, but the outcome of it was to send your team there, get trained, come home, and develop a specific capstone project to be implemented within the community.
Good afternoon. Rebecca Kiso-Knudsen. I'm with Lutheran Social Services, and I've just been asked to try to give you a real down and dirty quick summary of what the Capstone Project is all about. So I think you have information available in your packet, this presentation and the longer version of our proposal, Capstone Project. But the data that you see up on the chart now really helps to exemplify what the nature of the problem is. And it's not a problem that's unique here in Sioux Falls. A lot of jurisdictions in the country are dealing with a disproportionate representation of youth of color in the justice system. So on the left pie chart, you see a breakdown by race of the juvenile population, and on the right, you see the racial breakdown for juvenile arrests in 2016. And so you'll notice that for 2016, while youth of color represent 23% of the population, they represent 55% of the arrests. And so that's really the heart of the problem or the issue that the group has worked to address within the scope of the capstone. So our ultimate goal is to help to reduce that disproportionality within the juvenile justice system. And we have developed 4 strategies that we are working on implementation on in the community right now. And I'll just quickly highlight what those 4 areas are before we have the members of the Capstone Project come up and talk about their experiences. But the first is really to work toward the development of a school justice partnership agreement that is an agreement that exists between our schools, our law enforcement, and our court systems on what steps are taken when there are behavioral incidents in the community. And we kind of all come around at agreement that we want to keep kids in school, we want to keep kids successful, and so we have to agree on what steps we take that can help them to be successful and help them avoid future involvement in the justice system. So we'll be working, we have an external consultant that will be coming in later this summer that will help us work toward development of that partnership agreement, and it's a model that's been used in other jurisdictions successfully. The second strategy that we have is to hire a juvenile diversion coordinator, and that diversion coordinator will be hired and will work to assess youth who are involved in incidents in their school or in the community, to really assess what the heart of the problem is that may be contributing to the behavior that's leading to the arrest. And so we're working right now on finalizing the hire of that diversion coordinator, but expect that that position will begin in the next month or so. And then the last two sort of smaller bullet points that we're working toward are to expand access to more culturally informed programming for youth of color, and then to provide expanded access to training on implicit bias within our community. And so both of those things we'll be working on over the course of the next year. Funding for the capstone, it's been a really great opportunity to see different stakeholders come together and support this work. And so the State Council on Juvenile Services appropriated funding that helps support a percentage of that diversion coordinator position, as well as a lot of the consultation facilitation that will happen with those other items that I talked about. And then the county approved funding to cover the remaining percentage of that diversion coordinator FTE, and that was approved a couple of months ago and has helped us to work toward hiring. So with that, I'll turn it over to Judge Cutler.
Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I thank you for the opportunity to help inform you about what's happening in juvenile justice and our school justice partnership efforts. We were very excited to go to Georgetown as a part of our overall strategy to use efficiently the resources that we have in our community to address the needs of our youth and families, to help keep kids in school, and to meet the needs that we have sooner rather than later, rather than seeing kids get pushed deeper into the juvenile justice system and then later into the criminal justice system. We hope that, and we believe by the numbers and the evidence-based practices that we are exploring and implementing, that will have the result of really reducing the number of kids in the system and keeping them in school, with that emphasis on reducing the disparities for youth of color. For instance, one statistic that we have is that we know is 16% of our arrests are approximately 16% in school, and 60% of those are youth of color. So what can we do? That's a pretty glaring statistic when you look at it. Georgetown was amazing, not only because of the experience and the information, but working with the other teams from across the country. We had one team that was from Iowa, or instructors from Iowa. Since then, we've had a team come up from Omaha to learn from us about what we're doing along the way as well. And this was more than just an academic exercise. I will say for me personally, it gave me a means to organize all of these efforts and pull stakeholders together so that we know we are giving our very best efforts and we're doing the very best we can to address these issues. And for me, it was very much a call to action. I have a wonderful team that I was a member of, and they will tell you a little bit about their experiences, but some of the training that we had specifically on implicit bias is training that we're bringing back to South Dakota, and it was life-changing for us, and we believe that it will be very impactful to our systems of justice. And with our memorandum of understanding that we're creating with the school district, with our police officers, with our stakeholders, we believe that this is going to be a very positive step forward. We have these things in play, and by school year next fall, I hope to be able to send out a report to you or be a part of the informational that tells you that there are some significant strides being made for our youth and families in the Justice and School Partnership. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jason Leach. I'm a sergeant with the Sioux Falls Police Department, currently assigned to supervise our school resource officers. We have 14 school resource officers throughout the city of Sioux Falls that service 59 different school buildings and 7 different districts throughout the city. In that capacity, I had the opportunity to attend Georgetown certificate program with the rest of my group here, and we don't want to sell ourselves short here, but the rest of the group the rest of the candidates that were there were jealous of our comprehensive group we had. Nobody else had a group that had different disciplines. A lot were from juvenile services, maybe a whole group from them. So we had a very cross-section group. So it was great for us to learn from each other. I was one of 2 law enforcement professionals in the room, so it was good to be able to give my perspective as a law enforcement officer to other judges, other prosecutors, defense attorneys, juvenile court services workers. So it was a pleasure to go, and I appreciate Chief Burns giving me the time to attend this as well. One thing that was alluded to earlier was our counterparts close to us, Davenport, Iowa, and Johnson County, Iowa, down in Iowa City area, are two other groups that have attended the certificate program in the past. Both of them have come back, done their capstone project. The capstone was approved, and they've implemented it over the years. They've seen significant reduction in their juvenile disproportionality, but also it affects all juveniles. I mean, the title of the conference or certificate program is Reducing Racial and Ethnic Disparities, but all juveniles will benefit from this as well. So our project does start small, and we want to tackle the runaway epidemic that's going on. If anybody sees the social media from the Sioux Falls Police Department page, constantly runaways. So one of the areas we want to focus on is those first-time runaway offenders, getting them in contact with our diversion coordinator right away, getting them some programming instead of this being a lapse where they might not see or hear from somebody from the court system for anywhere from a couple weeks to maybe a month or more. Well, that's not effective. We found that's not effective. So if we can get somebody contact from these entities that are using this right now, or seeing contact from the diversion coordinator within 48 to 72 hours, right away they're getting contacted by this diversion coordinator. They're setting up programming. Obviously, this is a voluntary basis, and we have some protocols to set in place for this first-time offenders. But what they're seeing is these first-time offenders that are going through the diversion aren't reoffending. So they're seeing great results from this, and so this is something that we're obviously very passionate about and feel very strongly about. And our proposal that the comprehensive capstone project was actually accepted by Georgetown, and all of us became members of their fellowship network for the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform as well. So that's kind of a great feather in our hat, and something that we can bring forward and use in implementing this procedure, or this capstone project as we move forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Carol James, Deputy State's Attorney for Minnehaha County. I guess I will give you a little background information about diversion in general, since nobody's really touched on that, and I'm not sure how familiar the council is with that. But Senate Bill 73 a few years ago mandated that juvenile diversion be mandatory for all first-time nonviolent misdemeanor offenses. Prior to that, the state's attorney's office, the entire time I've been employed there, which is 11 and a half years, has been very supportive of diversion. We have always been referring kids to diversion. And in fact, in advance of that bill being passed, we created, with the assistance of the Sioux area Boy Scouts, a second-time diversion program for second-time offenders, because we knew that the bill was anticipating that if a child hadn't been diverted in 12 months, then they could even get a second diversion. So we had created that program in advance of that, knowing that we were going to be doing even more diversion than we had been doing before. We know that diversion is successful, but one area that we struggle with is that our numbers that we're seeing in our office, and the number of prosecutors we have, which is basically 1.5, myself and another half-time prosecutor, dedicated to juvenile cases, can't keep up with the caseload. There's too many cases coming in for us to review in a timely fashion. Other jurisdictions across the country had created this model of a diversion coordinator which allowed not only prosecutors to refer to this person, but also law enforcement to refer directly to them, which then cuts down that lag time. So our theory is that an officer like Sergeant Leach, who's in the school, when they see a kid and the kid has done something wrong, can immediately contact that diversion coordinator, find out what the child's prior history is, if anything, and then make that referral immediately, bypassing the state's attorney's office. Part of the agreement between Lutheran Social Services and the state's attorney's office will be different protocols set in place as to what cases are appropriate for diversion, and that we would be allowing this diversion coordinator to make those decisions, in addition to our office actually sending them diversions directly to for cases that actually do get to us without going from law enforcement directly to this person. But there are times that I received a call from a parent this morning whose child had contact with law enforcement on June 1st, and they were wondering what was going on with the case, and we hadn't had time to review it yet. So this hopefully will allow kids to get services that much faster, and not be able to reoffend multiple times before they're talking to somebody about what happened and why it happened. The experience in Georgetown was, I know people have said amazing, but it was a life-changing experience for myself. Prosecutors have all the authority for what cases go into court, and implicit bias is everywhere, regardless of whether we think we have it, we do. And so it was great to have some self-reflection during this training and to know, I guess, how much power we have and whether we're using it appropriately. Other jurisdictions, as I said, have done this and have reduced the number of youth of color in the system. And in my 11 and a half years that I've worked in the state's attorney's office, I've seen kids go through the juvenile system and then enter the adult system repeatedly. And we want to stop that. And I feel that this diversion coordinator position, along with the school justice partnership, are ways to hopefully reduce the number of kids of color in our system and all kids in general as well. I think the saying, it takes a village, is true. I think it takes everybody in the community to join together to address this issue, and it's not just about kids and parents, it's about all of us doing our parts as well. I really appreciate you taking the time today to listen to us, and Aaron will wrap up for us.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time, and just to dovetail off of what Carol said, is it does take a community. The basis behind this is just a few points. One is the collaboration. As you can see, our group represents various sectors of government and the community to be able to come together to meet the kid and the family where they at. Prevention and intervention is key to address some of the drug and alcohol problems that we see in our community, and this is just one way to do that. So as we get the diversion coordinator up and going and we refer out to community services, we'll be collecting data and looking at any gaps or anything that we need, and we'll be looking for our community partners to help us fill those gaps of services. And just one last note, I like research and I like data, and I just got a research notification this morning that just today published, not hard copy but digital, was an academic research article saying that diversion works. Any youth, when compared to youth that did not do any diversion, they were less likely to get arrested as a young adult. So it was just timing that the article was published today and we're researching today. If you want it, I will send you the abstract. With that, I'll open up for any questions.
Thank you, Erin. All right, open up any questions. Councilor Neitzert.
Thank you. Since this isn't my or our wheelhouse, can you give a few examples of what diversion would be? I mean, if you divert them to what would they be required to do?
Diversion legally means that we have assessed that the case is prosecutable and chargeable, and so instead of filing a formal petition charging them in court and having them see a judge, we're referring their case to a diversion program. We have different diversion programs within the community, a couple run by Boy Scouts, one run by Lutheran Social Services, and then the probation department with court services actually does an informal diversion as well. So once we refer them to that program, then they meet with the program. They have to agree to do it. You basically have to admit guilt to do it. And then each diversion has its own rules and what they require of the kid. So, for example, if we referred a child to the teen court program for petty theft, then they may require the child to do community service, write an apology letter to the merchant, come back and serve on the teen court jury and judge other kids and sentence other kids, volunteer their time for teen court as an attorney. There are different, things. A lot of times they have them apologize to their parents for making their parents go through what they've gone through. If it's a drug or alcohol related case, then they might also require a chemical dependency evaluation and UAs on a regular basis to make sure the child's not using.
If they don't follow the rules, kind of like if I'm on probation and I don't follow the rules, how does that work? What are consequences?
Yes, there's a time limit. So statutorily, a diversion can be 120 days from the date they agree to do it or sign consent. So if in that 120 days they don't complete the terms of their diversion or they reoffend by committing any new crime, then the case can be referred back to our office for formal prosecution. And oftentimes we will file a formal petition as well as charge any new offenses.
But if they follow through, they'll have a clean record. There's nothing on the record showing that they've had a conviction, which would help them going forward if they get on the straight and narrow, as it were?
Correct. Since we never file a formal petition, the actual court record doesn't know anything at all about it. It's a record within our office and a record of arrest within the arresting agency. If they successfully complete diversion, then we put it in our system as a successful diversion, but there's nothing to dismiss because nothing was ever filed.
And finally, can you just repeat again what was it a House bill or a Senate bill?
It was Senate Bill 73, and it passed, I think, July of 2015.
Did that mandate that for certain things that you must do diversion,
yes,
or it's optional?
It required any child who doesn't have any prior adjudications, meaning convictions, and they're committing a nonviolent misdemeanor offense and haven't had a diversion within 12 months must be diverted to a court-approved diversion program.
I'm obviously, diversion is a good thing. That's not my where I'm going with this, but does that, having prosecutorial discretion can be good at times. Does that create any sort of tying your hands or anything where they know that they're not gonna be able to, prosecute me, or is that?
Well, there's
unintended consequences, I guess.
Right. There's a good clause provision in the mandatory diversion. So if it's a case where the prosecutor feels that it really should not be diverted because of the facts or what have you. For example, possession of a weapon in school is a nonviolent misdemeanor offense. So if a child were to bring a loaded gun to school and do nothing with it other than merely possess it in their pocket, that would be mandatory diversion. We may not feel that that's appropriate because it's a loaded weapon in a school, and therefore we could file on good cause. We just have to allege in our petition that we're filing on good cause and then list the reason why. The child or the court can move to have it diverted, or the court can decide there isn't good cause and then divert it anyway based on that. Sometimes we have that come up in other types of offenses too that I don't know the legislature was necessarily thinking of when they created the law. So.
Okay, but you have the right to go to a judge and try to show good cause, and both sides can argue it, essentially.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Starr.
Yes, and I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but maybe Sergeant Leach, you could help me a little bit if you don't mind. We as a council have spent a lot of time in the last year or so debating prevention, and mostly with drug and alcohol things that we've funded through the city's budget over the last few years. Do you feel like there are enough resources for that to get to kids in school early enough so that before that there's a problem? I mean, are your resource officers, maybe let me go this way, that they have the tools available to help kids before they get in trouble? Because that was really our biggest concern is, one, if we're going to do prevention for drugs and alcohol, how do we measure it? And how do we see? And it's hard to measure helping someone before they get in trouble, I guess, is where I'm at. And then I want to make sure that if your officers are there in the school, that they feel like they have those resources to, whether it's diversion, whether it's working with families, is there enough, is it working, I guess is.
Right, and I think, like you said, it is very difficult to judge and put a number on that. What programming we have in place, whether it's the school district programming or it's the program we do have in place. We have programming in place for the grade schools, 1st through 5th grade, where our SROs are going in and doing presentations to the various classes and working on that. And we do see positive results from that. And so this is just another avenue that would basically empower the SRO that if they are coming across an offense that Carol had outlined there, that we could divert that and hopefully see some outcome. If we're bringing this, starting this fresh at the 2018-2019 school year, we would be able to see what our results are at the end of that school year to see if we've been successful in that. So,
I think Erin wants to jump in with. She's our numbers person, right?
Yeah, so you know exactly where I'm going with this. As you know, you look at, Judge Cutler mentioned some statistics about our arrests. A majority of our arrests are runaway and chintz charges, and if they're not those, they're revolving around alcohol and drug use. So when we talk about early intervention and prevention, that's the way that we're going to have the largest impact in our community. To answer your question, are there gaps? We don't know yet. We're hoping to see, are there appropriate specific programs for us to refer to, or are there gaps? That will be part of the process that we have with the coordinators. They meet with the kid and the family, do an assessment, figure out what their needs are, and then assign the program according to the needs of the kids and the family to make them the most successful. So I think when we start this program and start implementing, we'll be able to have the data to show if there are any gaps, what they are, and where to really strategize to focus any prevention and intervention efforts.
Do we, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I want to just follow up. As part of this, are there resources then for the family as well? Because a big part of this is sometimes we see troubled kids who are not doing well, but it's because of where they come from. And so if we don't help the family get better, it's hard to divert that child if they're going back to the same environment, isn't it? I mean, that would...
I'll say one thing, and then I'll turn over to the team because they talked about that specifically, that none of us operate in vacuums. We all have a family, and what family means is something different to every person. It's important to recognize that when you're working with the youth and the family, or even an adult for that matter. So that was something that was mentioned in the training, and one of the focuses of the diversion coordinator is to meet the kid and the family where they're at.
Part of that Senate bill that I mentioned already was to take money from the Department of Corrections for kids that have been placed in facilities and take that money and turn it over to the Department of Social Services for front-end stuff. Functional family therapy was the biggest part of that, and anyone in this community can refer themselves to functional family therapy without being justice system involved. The school can refer, DSS can ask that the people they're working with be placed in that program. Diversion has access to that, or if you're just a parent who's struggling, you can contact and ask to be involved in that as well. So that is something that focuses on the whole family and focuses on the family in their home around their work schedules to make sure that everybody can be there to address the issues. And we've had some really great success with functional family therapy.
I think that's awesome, because what happens oftentimes is we try to save money in one place by not incarcerating people, but we don't invest in keeping people out of jail on the other side of it, and we use that savings, quote unquote, savings somewhere else. And so to see it invested back into trying to make things better and getting help for people on the front end of it. So I'm assuming there probably isn't a cost to that, to the family, or is it a sliding scale, or is it?
I don't believe there is a cost, because I think it's paid for by those tax dollars that were repurposed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other?
Anybody else? Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Next up, we will have an Emerald Ash Borer update. So please come forward and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, City Council. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation, and we are here to provide you with an update on the emerald ash borer infestation. And I would like to start by thanking the city team that has worked on this already and will continue to work on this. Now, we have had representatives from Human Resources, Code Enforcement, the Mayor's Office, Sioux Falls Fire Rescue, City Attorney's Office, GIS and Multimedia Support, Finance, and Public Works. And at this time, I would like to introduce Dr. John Ball, who is one of the nation's leading experts in this insect. He works for South Dakota State Extension and with the South Dakota Department of Agriculture as a forestry health specialist.
Welcome.
I think I've already been introduced, so I'll get started. I have no good news for you this afternoon, I just have bad news. How you do it depends on how bad it will be, so I'll start with that. Emerald ash borer was confirmed here in the beginning of May. It was inevitable. We knew it was coming since about 2002. The question was how long it was going to take to be here. The fact that it took this long is actually a plus. It would have been nice had it been even longer, but that's just the way the cards were drawn. It appears to be relatively young. That's quite unusual. This was not that it was already infesting the entire city before it was caught. It was actually a rather small infestation. It appears to be about 250 trees. And from our work, it appears to have been here for the most part for 2 years. There are a few trees that appear to have been infested for as long as 4 years. By the way it's gone across the country, we caught it fairly early. Right? That is the only good news. When we take a look at it, Sioux Falls is now the new entry into this. We are now the 33rd state to be infested with emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer has now killed about 100 million ash trees across the country. It will kill all our ash trees as well unless they are treated. So this is not one that any of our ash trees are going to survive unless they are specifically treated for this. Right now, the infestation is concentrated in the northern part of the city, which again is good. Much of the city so far appears to be uninfested. We've done surveys throughout the town looking for it, and we're not able to find it. So that is a positive. The negative is this picture. This is the bad picture. This is what's called the death curve. Death curve shows that how you'll lose your ash trees. Right now, we're about year 2, a little beyond in this. We have somewhere around 250 trees infested. If we do nothing, this is how the death curve will go. You can come back a year or 2 later and we've lost 2,600 trees. Even if you take a look 4 years from now, we'll have lost 13,000 trees. People are going to wonder, well, what was the big deal? Why did we all talk about it? What was the problem? I don't see anything. And then suddenly look from year 6 to year 10. Somewhere in that time period, you're going to lose 60,000 trees. Everyone will notice it. You'll be able to drive down streets filled with standing dead trees. To make that even worse, with emerald ash borer, the dead trees do not stand very long. These do not become ghost trees that stand for 10 or 20 years. Once these trees die, they become very brittle in fall. I've worked with communities out east where their biggest problem now from the city is trees that are just collapsing on the streets. That's not a situation that we want. But again, the point of this one is if nothing is done, this is the way the death curve will go. And approximately 10 years from now, emerald ash borer will not be a problem because there won't be any ash left in the city. What we can do is stretch out that death curve. It doesn't have to be this quick. There's no reason that we cannot have ash in this community 10 years from now. Can you come just
a little closer to the mic? The recorders need to, thank you. Sorry.
That we can have the ash trees here even 10 years from now or 12 years from now. We're not going to stop the death curve. What we're going to do is try to stretch it out. That buys you more time. It gives more time for young trees to grow and fulfill that canopy. It also reduces city resources as you're taking trees out and reduces the community resources as homeowners are struggling to take down their trees or treat them or replant. I do want to mention injections. There are incredibly effective injections for this insect. There are injections that have a 95 to 97% success. And we are encouraging people to inject the ash trees they like. One of the things that we have done is told people, take a look at your yard right now in Sioux Falls. Look at your ash trees. Decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't care about. The ones you don't care about, remove them. The ones you like, start beginning a process of injecting them. The injections cost about $200 to $300 per tree. Some trees as much as $400, some a little bit more depending on their size. They are done every other year. So it's just not a vaccination, you have to continue them. What we've seen in other communities is what we call injection fatigue, that a homeowner says, well, I'll do it, and they do it again, and they do it the third time, and then they say, nah, I don't want to spend any more money. Or they move, and the minute you stop doing injecting, your tree becomes infested and dies. And so it is an ongoing process, at least for the next 10 years. After that, the remaining ash can survive without being injected quite that often. We are encouraging people to do so, but again, just as there's very effective treatments for Dutch elm disease, and injection as well, look how many elms are left in the community here, because people just get tired of doing it. I might mention too, as I'm finishing up, that there'll be a wasp introduced into Sioux Falls. It's a very small insect that will also feed on the emerald ash borer. I've already heard people say, well, that'll take care of the problem. It's a very, very, very minor. It's going to help slow it, but a very minor point. The real thing that can be done, of course, is managing this over the next 15 years to help slow and stretch out that death curve. And with that, I will turn it back so that can be discussed.
Well, as Dr. Bell had mentioned, this infestation was inevitable. So we have had some time to learn from other people who have gone before us and who have experienced this infestation. And something that has stuck with us is comments from other communities where they say they wish they had started sooner. The pictures there show a ash tree-lined street in Toledo, Ohio, before the infestation, of course, and then after. We are fortunate, though, in Sioux Falls we don't have a lot of streets like this. There are a few tree-lined streets that are solely ash trees, but not a lot. We need to stay ahead of the death curve. As mentioned, that was one of the things that we need to make sure that we do and that our response does for us. We have prepared for this arrival, and we will reevaluate as the infestation spreads. We have learned that we do not want to go out and remove all of the ash trees that are around the infestation. Kind of a clear cut, so to speak, because when communities have done that, the insect has spread faster, simply because it's looking for food. The insect can fly up to 10 miles, so if we cut down all the ash trees around the infestation, it'll spread. It'll jump our fire line, so to speak, but it won't jump it in one direction, it'll jump it in several. So we will essentially just spread it faster. The treatments, as Dr. Ball mentioned, can be effective to slow the spread of the insect. However, stopping the infestation is not possible. We need to start our replanting efforts. We need to make sure that we diversify the urban forest as these replanting efforts begin. We need to target no more than 5% of any tree species as we go back to our replanting efforts. And we need to consider some ordinance changes that would help support the increased diversity in planting. Something like a permitting process to allow trees to go back in the public right-of-way. We need to focus on public safety. As Dr. Ball mentioned, these standing dead ash trees are hazardous. They become brittle and they fail quickly, and they're also unpredictable when they do fail. Dead ash trees are more expensive to remove because they're hazardous to the people that need to remove them. Poor quality trees need to be addressed soon because they will help minimize the number of standing dead ash trees later because they are prime targets for the insect as it spreads. I want to make sure that we understand how we've categorized the trees throughout town and the numbers that we're looking at, because in Sioux Falls we do have a lot of ash trees. Street trees, which would be trees in the public right-of-way essentially between the sidewalk and the curb. About 40% of all of our street trees are ash trees, or about 22,800 of them. Parks and public trees, there's about 16,500. That includes the riparian areas along the river and also natural areas where we've got native stands of ash trees. The 19% with the asterisk is up there to show that we have only 19% of open grown trees within the park system are ash trees. So we've done a good job of managing it so far within the park system. And then private trees, we estimate that about 20% of all the trees on private property are ash trees, or just over 45,000 trees, for a total of about 85,000 ash trees in Sioux Falls. Just some pictures to show what we can expect. The upper left picture is a native area that shows how the native ash trees were infested and then died, and the trees that are remaining around them. The picture below that is a picture of a tree that is infested with the emerald ash borer. A picture in the middle is a picture from St. Paul, Minnesota. It was dubbed as Stump Row. The community doesn't have the funds at this point to remove the stumps. They've got the trees out, but they've got trees or streets lined with stumps. And then the final picture is a picture of a standing dead ash tree. One of those trees that after it's been dead for more than a year can become hazardous and fail. One of the last things that we've learned through conversations with other communities is that there's not one perfect response plan. There's not one perfect approach for all communities. And that's because there's various factors that go along with that. There's the number of ash trees that we just went through. The city of Omaha only has about 4,200 ash trees in the streets. We've got over 22,000, so our problem's a little different than theirs. The stage of the infestation, as Dr. Ball mentioned, we were fortunate. We caught it early. We have been preparing for it, and now we can provide a response. And the community's capacity to combat the emerald ash borer as far as trying to slow the infestation and stay ahead of the death curve. Now I'd like to talk about our proactive approach. In this proactive approach, with more than half of the ash trees being on private property, this approach has the city addressing public trees as well as street trees. And we would start with a 10-year plan. Of course, as I'd mentioned, we would adjust annually as we continue to learn. And in 2019, we would target the removal of public trees and street trees, about 10% of that total. We begin with the selective removal of trees to reduce the number of trees that will become infested. Start with the largest trees first. We've already talked about the public safety aspect of that. Start with poor quality trees that would be early targets for the insect, and trees that are in a bad location. Think of trees under power lines. Not only are they in a bad location anyway, but if they're standing dead, they can be tricky to remove. And the picture on this slide is a picture from another community where they've got standing dead ash trees and they're simply pushing them over with a piece of equipment. As I'd mentioned, we do know the number of ash trees. We have counted them by forestry district, the street trees and the public trees. All of the city parks do have a complete tree inventory, and we will leverage the use of master gardeners and other volunteers to help us complete a street tree inventory. This street tree inventory is going to be critical in our replanting efforts to ensure that we do get the diversity necessary for our urban forest going forward and that we don't repeat history. I'll begin with selective removals in the core part of our city by removing a third of the trees in any given block until we reach a total of 2,200 street trees in 2019. We'll also do selective removal of park and public trees as well. And we will continue to restrict the movement of ashwood between Memorial Day and Labor Day in an effort to slow the spread of the infestation. There's been some talk already about the death curve, and this slide shows our death curve with our proposed pace of removal. Of course, this is a 10-year plan that we will reevaluate every year, so this is not a 10-year plan that's necessarily exactly how things are going to go, but it's a place for us to start. The red line represents the number of public trees. The blue line is the number of street trees, and then the gray line is the total number of ash trees. The gold line is the proposed pace of removal of about 3,800 trees per year, and you can see still when we get out to about 6 years that is where those two lines intersect. Of course, the death curve shows, as Dr. Ball said, is if we do nothing. By removing these trees, we fully expect that this death curve extends out and flattens out. The current forestry resources that we have right now, we've got three two-person crews made up of a forestry park caretaker and a park service worker, along with seasonal employees. Of course, there's miscellaneous equipment that goes along with those crews. And there's also a list of capital equipment up there that we use right now through all of our forestry operations. As we get into this response with the Emerald Ash Borer, there's going to be additional capital equipment needed. The picture here is a piece of equipment that we're evaluating. It's called a grapple saw. This piece of equipment will reach up into the tree, grab a hold of the branch, and then cut it off, and then lower it to the ground. This removes the need for rigging, which would have to be done with our current equipment, where we would tie a pulley system up onto another branch to lower a branch down that we were then removing. Also within this $500,000 is additional equipment to help us load and haul the wood waste. And of course, there are other operating costs that would be needed with this response. About $275,000 in additional personnel, a dedicated forestry health specialist that would help not only in managing the infestation, but also tracking and managing the street tree inventory and the park tree inventory as we move forward. And an additional forestry crew, the park forestry caretaker and a park service worker I mentioned earlier, as well as seasonal employees. And then there's $825,000 in contracted services. Essentially, this would be street tree removal contracts, similar to the one that we have in place now, that would remove the 2,200 trees on the streets. Would also be stump removal. What's not included in these estimated costs is street tree inventory. We are going to leverage volunteers, like I'd mentioned earlier. However, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we would contract with a third party to come in and complete that street tree inventory for us, because again, it is critical in our replanting efforts. And then replanting is also not in these numbers. Replanting is something that will likely begin in 2020, mainly because we need to get our street tree inventory completed, and also it helps us give a chance to make sure that there are locations for these trees to go back in. Within the park system, it's easy. We have lots of space. We can replant trees. Along the street, if we're removing every third tree, essentially, putting a tree right back in that spot's not necessarily a good spot for that tree. So as we get deeper into the response, those replanting efforts, we also have already received commitments from people who are willing to donate funds to the replanting effort throughout the city. There are other city departments that, of course, will be impacted by this response and through the infestation. Public Works, for example. Light and Power has, of course, line clearance duties that they contract. The landfill, where the wood waste will be taken. Street Department, of course, with some of their equipment to help us with this infestation. So in conclusion, we believe that we've put together a solid plan to begin managing the infestation and smooth out the impact, and of course adjust the strategy as we learn more every year. The plan is for us to start early, to start replanting, to stick with the plan so that as John mentioned, we stay ahead of the death curve and don't end up with thousands of standing dead trees facing us one day. Avoid the 5-year, nobody told us this would happen, which has happened in other communities where next year at this time, if you look around Sioux Falls, you're not likely to see much difference as far as impacts of the emerald ash borer. But in 5 years, if we don't do anything, we definitely will see those impacts. We, of course, will continue to communicate throughout this response, not only with you, the City Council, but also with the public and any affected property owner. And we don't want to repeat history. We want to make sure that we diversify the tree population. We are here because with the Dutch elm disease response, we planted ash trees. Now with our emerald ash borer response, we want to make sure that we don't plant a monoculture of something else. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kelby. Councilors, questions? Councilor Sale.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I know the trees in this city are something that bring people to the parks. I just got to help me with my math a little bit. You're talking about $500,000 for equipment, annual operating costs of about $1.1 million for 8,500 trees per year.
For 3,800 trees per year.
3,800 trees
and these
is going to cost us $1.1 million.
Yeah, these costs in here at this point are for 2019. This would be part of our 2019 operating budget request. We fully expect that the 800,000 number for contractual services will come down once the new forestry crew that we are proposing gets fully equipped and ready and then starts removing street trees. So we're going to use going forward, the plan is to use a combination of city resources and contractors to remove street trees.
So do you have an estimate on these 85,000 trees on what the total cost is going to be over the next 10 years?
Well, the $1 million a year has been something that we have have looked at. But again, of that 85,000, 45,000 of those are on private property. And those are trees that we would not address through this response. We would only address the 38,000 that are on streets and on public property.
Has there been any talk of treatment for any of the trees that are public trees that the city is responsible for?
Yep, absolutely, there has been. At this point, and I've mentioned that we want to reevaluate this every year. But at this point, we want to make sure that because the infestation is small and it's localized, that we want to use the resources in 2019 that we would have to thin the urban forest. We already have more ash trees than we really should have, and thinning the urban forest then would help with that anyway. And then next year we can evaluate whether or not treatment is an option if the infestation is spread too fast and we want to continue to treat or begin treating to help slow that infestation, or if we need to ramp up our removal efforts. The situation we want to avoid is standing dead ash trees.
Okay, my last question, is it going to make Elmwood Golf Course any easier to play?
With my game, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you. And I appreciate the report, and Dr. Bell, I attended the State Forestry Conference this past winter. In fact, I sat right next to our forester, Dwayne Stahl. And at that time, we hadn't identified the emerald ash borer yet. However, we knew it was coming, and it just came sooner rather than later. I'm still not certain that I could identify it from all the other different insects that are out there, but it is, as Councilor Sales stated, I mean, we're going to be looking at millions of dollars in terms of investment here, and that's just it's hard to say that we're even going to maintain what we have, because obviously much of what we have is going to be gone, and then we're going to be trying to replace it. So, Dr. Bell, this is probably a question for you. Is it inevitable, even with treatment, that eventually your ash tree is going to become infested?
No, with treatments, they are so effective that an ash tree will remain here after the epidemic is over, after we lose most of the ash. There are communities that, as he mentioned, that have trees that are important to them, that there are key trees in parks, for example, or along streets, or heaven forbid, a golf course, all right, that they do want to maintain, and those are treated every other year until after the epidemic is over, and then that treatment expands for every 5 or 6 years. And of course, there are homeowners that will treat trees as well. Again, if it's a healthy tree to begin with, and the treatments are done right, treatments are highly effective.
Okay. So it comes down to dollars and cents then, basically what you want to invest and what you're going to get as what your return is going to be. I mean, because if we started now with a treatment, within 6 years we've invested $1,000 in treatments if we go with an average of 250, which is your midpoint between your $200 to $300 per tree. Question and for homeowners that want to be proactive. For instance, I have an ash tree that I planted. How close can you plant another tree to an existing tree to try to get ahead of the curve, knowing that your ash is going to go away? And I have an ash that took a beating in the ice storm a number of years ago, so I would question whether I'd want to make that kind of investment in it, even though it's the canopy is starting to look like that of a normal tree now. I'm still not certain that I would want to make that investment.
Understood. And let me answer your first question, or that first part. Let's say instead we said we're going to take the money and we're going to inject every city ash tree, the extreme. First of all, there's some of those trees that are not good candidates for injection. They should be removed anyway. But let's say we did it. We already have far too much ash here. So we're perpetuating a bad thing. Plus, just to make things worse, right now in Europe, primarily the UK, there's a disease that's killing all their ash trees that came from China. And what's to say that disease could not get here in another 15 years, and we have no controls of that, and we would say, wait a minute, we saved all the ash trees to be killed by something else. So I do think treatments are part of the equation, but they are not something we want to do for every tree, key trees. For replanting, no. The best thing to do is if you have, as I've told people, choose the ash trees you want to protect, choose the trees you don't like. Look at your ash trees. Kind of like your kids, pick your favorites. All right? The rest, of course, you're just going to end up removing, but it's far better to remove the tree and replant than to plant a tree underneath a big tree. Those trees never turn out very well because of the competition with the big tree. And having done this before, even on our campus, you run the invariable risk that when you drop the big dead tree, you actually crush the little tree. So,
okay, once the tree has been removed and the stump has been removed, then still, how close can you plant a new tree?
Directly where the old tree was.
You can.
In fact, we do that on campus quite frequently. When the stump's ground out, you can literally plant directly in the same location.
Okay, so very good. Thank you. That's it for now.
Councilor Neitzer.
Yeah, it sounds like people were going down kind of the track I was, which was, I'm not sure what the right answer was, but the idea of whether or not, you know, there was a benefit in treating selected trees. No, I think it would be, I think the tough thing is obviously I would guess that everybody would have a different opinion of which tree should be saved, as far as there may be certain parks that certain people cherish. I could see, you know, like McKinnon Park, I think there's trees there, and so that may be a discussion point. So, but it might be an interesting you know, thing to talk about. I don't know how much it costs us to remove a very mature tree. If it's going to cost $1,000 or $2,000, maybe you could do the treatments for the 10 years or whatever and kind of outrun the disease, but or the ash borer. I'm sorry. Is once you cut one of these trees down and you, let's say, put it through a chipper, is it safe to use those like wood chips? I mean, can you repurpose that sort of thing? Because I remember when I lived in the Twin Cities, I think it was maybe Dutch elm. St. Paul was chipping up all of the trees, and they would put the wood chips in the park, and it was just free to take, and it was great. You go come get wood chips and fill up your yard. So what do you do with those once you cut them down?
Well, I'm going to answer part of that question. I'm going to turn it over because
okay.
This is actually one of the bright spots for Sioux Falls, South Dakota. What do we do with the wood waste? First of all, the part that I'll answer is
come up a little closer.
If you cut down an infested tree, that the beetles that are in it can survive to come out. And so we've got to be very careful with the movement. Hence, right now, we're saying you cannot cut down an ash tree inside the city limits of Sioux Falls and move it, because the beetles fly between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So we don't want people moving that. Mm. But once they've left the tree's been down, so now it's fall, they will not reinfest those trees or those chips. And the good thing is that there is a place of dealing with all that wood debris.
Right. We at the landfill, of course, has a way to grind and then dispose of wood waste currently, like they do now, at a place that has the capacity to take all of the wood waste.
Okay. Yeah, what the landfill's already doing, that ships them off like
Right.
whether to be
Right, this would just
pallets or whatever.
add quantity of that wood waste to that.
Okay, and then as far as the boulevards trees, to be really clear, so the city already has a program, so those will be removed at the city's cost, not the adjacent property owner.
Right, that's the proposal here. We do have a street tree removal contract that program that we have had for, well, it dates back, I believe, to the Dutch elm disease days, in which we do a survey every July and look for dead and diseased trees in the right-of-way. We mark those trees, we communicate with the abutting property owner, and they're removed at no cost to the abutting property owner.
So the abutting property owner would get presumably some sort of notice, we're planning to come through your neighborhood, we've identified that we're gonna probably remove this tree, and so they're not surprised, you don't just show up and just cut it down.
Right. There's communication with them once the trees have been marked for removal. We don't tell them we're coming to the neighborhood because it's a citywide survey that we do every July. But yeah, we don't just show up one day and cut down a tree and leave, and they come home from work and wonder where their tree went.
So and then for this particular deal, stump removal, you will be doing that or contracting that after you remove said tree?
Yep, and that's part of our current street tree removal program also, that we also make sure that we remove the stumps as well.
And then maybe finally, even though obviously, trees in the boulevard, they're in city property, people obviously care about them, and so would there be communication or some sort of, do you want another tree? It's up to you, because I don't know, it may not be a given that somebody wants another tree in its place. Who decides and what tree to plant and where, or just, I don't want one?
Right. Those would be conversations we would have to have with the abutting property owners. In other projects, we've discovered that if we participate in street tree removal, if the abutting property owner doesn't have a vested interest in it, especially a financial interest in it, then they don't take care of the tree, and it dies anyway. So we need to make sure that any tree that goes back in the right-of-way is done so not only with the blessing, but with the commitment of the abutting property owner.
Very good, thanks.
Councilor Kiley?
If you want to go to Councilor Staley first.
You go ahead, Councilor Staley.
Thank you. I've got a question for John Ball. First of all, thank you for coming to our council meeting, and thank you for your articulate presentation. You are such a well-respected person in our state.
Thank you.
To explain to me and to the public what this treatment actually does to the ash borer, these injections, is that killing it, or I wasn't sure how that was being effective?
Well, the way most of them work, and there's a lot of technologies out there, but the most common is the chemical is injected directly into the tree trunk. Typically at about this time of year. This is the ideal time. By injecting it now, what happens is the beetle is flying, and it'll kill it by two ways. First of all, the chemical is taken up into the foliage, and the adults feed on the leaves for just a little bit, and they're often killed. But the primary way this kills is that the insect lays the eggs on the trees. The eggs hatch in late summer. As their young burrow into the tree, as they're feeding, they come in contact with the chemical and they're killed. The good thing is that these chemical treatments work to prevent the tree from becoming infested, and they also work therapeutically. In other words, if your tree is already infested, they will kill the insects that are in it. So this is not a case that we have to do all the trees before they're infested. If they become infested, these treatments will also kill all the young inside the trees.
So it's a systemic approach.
Very, very correct, right. It's
So,
systemic.
And then for a homeowner, can you visually see that there's been some boring in, or do you see the eggs on the leaves right now?
No, the eggs are so tiny, no one could really see them. What we look for right now is a little bit of woodpecker damage, but our advice to people right now, for example, if someone in Sioux Falls, I tell them, don't even call me to have me come out and take a look at your tree, because there's no point to it. It's in Sioux Falls. If it's not infested now, it will be infested soon. So that's why we're recommending homeowners who really like their tree to start looking at an injection program this year or next to protect the tree during this outbreak.
And then, now I have heard people report that it's going to be $1,000 a treatment. I mean, there's all sorts of figures all over the board on this thing. And I think we've seen companies emerging that we've never heard of. There's lots of competition out there. So is that treatment, I would think that the cost will be effective upon the size of the tree.
Correct, that the larger the tree, the more chemical has to be put in it. So, right, the larger tree, greater cost.
Because my neighbor was thinking it was going to cost him $1,000 to treat the tree.
Well,
he wasn't sure he wanted to spend that kind of money. So you're saying $200 to $300, which sounds much more reasonable.
Well, one of the things we've seen already is that there was kind of a basic treatment that companies were looking at charging, and when this first showed up, prices went up. You know, kind of like a gas scare. Let's all go prices up. And my advice to everyone in the community was get 2 quotes. Don't just get one. And the prices plummeted. And so that's a good thing. But the other part of it is very important, and that is, having learned this from mountain pine beetle out in the Black Hills, that it gets so competitive, some people get their price down by cutting the amount of chemical, and so it's not effective. As I've already told companies, we did a workshop this morning, that I'm going to go around this fall on trees that have been treated and randomly check them for the amount of chemical I find in them. And I better find the right amount of chemical. So we do have people that want to treat the city tree, the tree in front of their house. If they're doing that, they have to let the city know. I'm going to know which ones of those are treated. We're going to do a random check. And if I don't find the right amount of chemical in it, now we have problems, because I found once I started doing that in the Black Hills for mountain pine beetle, that really got everybody honest fast. I mean, most companies are, quite honestly, but there's always someone that says, well, you know what, I'll cut the chemical and I can cut my price. So we're already on the watch for that one.
So you're going to become the Ralph Nader of trees.
Yeah, I guess. That's a good way to look at it. I like that one.
Yes. Okay. And then I have a few more questions, but I'll...
Councilor Kiley?
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we're in this position now because of our reaction to Dutch elm disease some 40 years ago. And the fact that helped employ my older brother with the City Parks Department, because he worked with the then so-called tree crew, which was extremely busy removing elm trees throughout the city. And unfortunately, we're going to have probably employment opportunities again, removing the ash trees. So the diversification of our urban forests is very wise and advised. Diversification is always good, including us as a human population too. Do we already have a list of recommended species available on our website so that new homes that are being constructed can make the correct selections? And also, I guess, would that be available by neighborhood too, based on species that are already planted, so that we don't get neighborhoods that are all identical to one another?
Right. We do have an approved street tree list, trees that are approved to be planted within the right-of-way. The second part of that, though, that we don't have is we don't have the street tree inventory. So in my neighborhood, because I walk, I can tell you that we're not going to plant any more maples or lindens or locusts. But in your neighborhood, I don't know. I mean, we don't have those numbers, and that's why completing that street tree inventory is so critical.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. One of the things, is there anyone else? Yes, Councilor Staley.
Okay, so now I've got a few more questions for maybe Kelby, for you. Now, I'm so glad that Councilor Neitzer clarified that you're going to be taking care of removing those trees on the boulevard, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's the proposal.
Cutting that thing down. And somebody mentioned the cost. I don't know if they can get as big as a silver maple, but those things are $10,000 to take down. That can happen? Yes. So, I mean, it's not a cheap endeavor to remove a tree. Let's say we have those ash trees, ash tree on the boulevard, looks healthy, we're going to save it. Is the city going to pay for those treatments?
That's not part of our proposal at this point, to treat any of the street trees. We are aware that there are some private property owners that have treated those trees, and we're working with our arborist to make sure that we've got a tagging system that's going to be in place, because one of the last things we want to do is have somebody pay for the treatment and then for us to show up a couple weeks or months later.
That would not be good. We'd hear that at public input.
Yeah,
for sure,
that would not be good. So developing a program for us to track that and to make sure, and also to make sure that those trees are treated again in 2 years, that they're continuously treated if they're treated, and if they're not going to be continued to be treated, that they come back to a removal list.
And you're going to remove the tree stump as well? You're going to do, like,
Yes,
we won't
yes,
have that
ma'am,
St. Paul thing happening?
That's the proposal.
So we're going to be building this into the budget, and it's no secret that, and Mr. Ball, I think, you're from Brookings, is that correct? Yeah, over in Brookings, they don't have Project Trim. They take care of, I do believe they take care of the trees on the boulevard. And I have had a problem with that program to start with for many years. I see we're going to be adding some people here, and I'm assuming those are going to be full-time employees that you're going to be bringing on board. So I've also been talking to the warden and to our mayor about utilizing inmate workforce on our street department and in our forestry department, because we've been told that we implemented Project Trim because we have a lack of funds and resources to be able to take care of the boulevard trees in the residential areas. So I'm hoping that mixed in with this request for additional staff, we can look at adding a working relationship with the penitentiary, using these people who are going to be out in the street soon, and they come at a very reasonable cost, to implement that and complement that, and that we're going to be able to use this added staff, which I thought Dwayne was kind of our forestry specialist, but apparently we're going to hire someone else. But we're going to be taking all those employees, and we're going to be using them to help the citizens with the tree trimming, and that we would then eliminate Project Trim. That, I just want to say that publicly. I think that would be the right way to go with this and the perfect timing on it. So just, I'm not saying you have to commit to that or anything, but that's will be something I'll be advocating for. Okay?
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else have any other comments? Any other counselors? I did have a couple. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Kiley.
It is a response to Councilor Staley's recommendation. The trees that are, for instance, the tree in front of my home in the right-of-way is there because I elected to plant it. And I do agree with the strategy that there should be some skin in the game on the part of the homeowner when they make that conscious decision to plant a tree in the right-of-way, that they need to also be responsible for it. Otherwise, it becomes a burden for everybody else to take care of other than the individual. And so I would advocate that we continue down that same path because once again, the trees are there, not because the city planted them, but because the homeowners planted them. There might be some exceptions along city property, parks, and some of our through streets. But otherwise, it's the homeowner that made that conscious decision to plant that tree, or it was a homeowner that made that conscious decision to purchase that home with the tree already planted, knowing that that should be their responsibility to take care of as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond?
Yes,
well, and I've also had conversations with the arborists in Aberdeen where you don't touch those trees. And I think Brookings might have the same thing. I know Fargo does. The city wants to take care of those trees. They do, I see you're nodding yes. The city prides itself on those boulevard plantings. They take care of it. If you're going to trim your tree, you need to get a permit. You need to talk with them before you touch it. So if we say, well, we're only going to have trees if the homeowner plants it, then we're going to have a city without any trees. And I don't think that's where we want to go. So as a city council member, my impetus would be city steps up and says, we're going to take responsibility and we want to encourage people to do this. We will help you with it. We will do it. And we'll take care of those trees to make sure they're trimmed to specifications. So we're going to differ on that, but that's okay.
Yes, Councilor Neitzer.
One other thing I thought about, and I think Kelby is probably my person. So the $275,000 for personnel for the annual operating cost, and that would be the forestry specialist and then the crew. Would there be presumably any FTEs in there? And then after this is passed, do we just have extra people on? I mean, how would we handle this if this is perhaps a 10-year problem?
Within that $275,000 personnel are 3 full-time employees and seasonal employees. So this response would include, this forestry crew would go forward and would continue to go forward. And once we are done, say in 10 years, in removing ash trees, I can tell you now that we have an abundance of work for the current forestry crew, and in 10 years we're still going to have that abundance of work, and so these people will just continue to help us manage that workload.
Do we have extra slots right now for FTEs, or is this going to be, we're going to be seeing the budget request for new?
You're going to be seeing a budget request for new FTEs through this response, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other additional comments? I wanted to throw one out if we could. Mr. Maris, one of the things that, thank you for keeping us up to date on this project. I joked earlier today that we knew about emerald ash borer before it was cool, so I appreciate being ahead of the game that way. One of my concerns, though, is in the replacement process. Do we have a tree farm? Do we start with seedlings? How do we go about taking a look at replacing some of these ash trees? Dr. Bell did a nice job of saying, as soon as we cut the stump out, we better be there to, well, not his words, my words, that we should be there to replant right away. How do we do that? Do we buy the trees that are already that size? Do we have a tree farm or something that we can tree spade and move, starting with seedlings? Or how do we approach that?
We don't have a tree farm. We would need to purchase a tree, and we prefer trees to be planted in the 1.5 to 2 inch caliper to start with. Some of the issues that we could see with planting seedlings is if we are receiving conservation grade type seedlings instead of specimen tree type seedlings, and any of the trees that we want to go back in, of course, we want to be specimen type trees.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess we're, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Staley, go ahead.
Are there municipalities in South Dakota that have tree farms?
I don't know the answer to that.
Dr. Ball, I mean, I would think that would be a more reasonable expense than.
Well, I'm sorry to say it's not. And the problem with it is that once you have a tree farm, you now have additional personnel. You have to have someone take care of it. Some of the cities have tried growing their own trees, but it just becomes we're going to go plant trees and nobody really takes care of them, and they never really grow well. So if you were going to say you were going to start a nursery and hire a nursery manager, I would be for that. But if it's just to go out and plant a tree bank, as it's called, many communities, Brookings, for example, doesn't do that now. Aberdeen doesn't do it as much, and that just because of the fact that since no one's dedicated to caring for those trees, as they would be in a nursery, they don't do well. However, what a lot of places do is contract grow. For example, on our campus, we make a commitment to nurseries. You grow these, we're going to buy them. So essentially, we take the advantage of the cost, but they're growing them for us, so that relieves us of the need to have the land and a dedicated staff and that allows us to have the diversity that we want. And I find that's working far better for cities.
Thank you.
All right, we have an audience full of some very well-dressed people with some designs we'd like to see more of. So Mr. DeBoer or Mr. Snyder, who's going to start us out here?
Hi, my name is John Snyder. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at 605 Magazine. I won't be saying the term death curve today. So.
Thank you.
In the last month, we've restarted a conversation with city government, and we penned a group letter to the mayor. And in the issue of brevity, I'm going to read a little bit of that briefly, and then make a brief remark, and then turn it over to a few other people who are very interested in this topic. In this letter last month to the mayor, I wrote, "I'm writing you today as a resident of Sioux Falls and an advocate for its success. I'm asking you in your assistance in delivering a long overdue point of pride to our great city, a flag we can call our own. Sioux Falls is one of only a handful of major cities in the country that does not have an official flag. In a vibrant and growing city that consistently finds itself atop best of lists, this lack of symbolic unity is a hole in our resume. Recently, the call for a Sioux Falls flag has been gaining momentum. Attached, you'll find a copy of the September 2017 issue of 605 magazine, where we did a cover story entitled The People's Flag that gives some details about the backstory, the origins of the design, the contest, where it was born, and the professional judging of that contest. The article also gives a glimpse into the grassroots efforts to encourage our city to adopt the winning design. Then I asked him to read it, if he hadn't already. Also, we gave him a screen print made by a local artist and a full-size replica of the proposed flag. I continued personally. This flag grew on me over the last 2 years. I wasn't initially very excited for the idea, but the design grew on me, and the passion of the growing group of flag supporters has been exciting to watch. Even without the city government's official embrace, the Sioux Falls flag has served as a unifying symbol. It has already been adopted in spirit. You see it outside of businesses, homes, in local art, even in tattoos. I feel the draw is undeniable. I feel there's never been a better time to give Sioux Falls a common banner to embrace and rally behind. Below you'll find a few signatures of active members in our community. These women and men are professionals in the field that lend them to understanding the quality of the design and the importance of having an identifying mark that can help raise the visibility of Sioux Falls. They echo my sentiments in this letter and have signed their support. And it was co-signed by Corey Myers, News Director for the Argus Leader, Christine Erickson of the Sioux Falls City Council, Joe Batchelor, the President of Downtown Sioux Falls Incorporated, Zach DeBoer, the owner of Exposure Gallery, Kellen Boyce, Director of Sioux Falls Design Center. I brought up with me, I'm obviously wearing the shirt, which is the design. It's sold in many local businesses. The original artist released the design into the Creative Commons space. CreativeCommons.org is a kind of a global standard for copyright releasing. They have about 500 people that they employ across, I think it's north of 7 countries. And a lot of them donate their time. They're legal experts, design experts, things like that. So that's kind of the standard that people look to across the globe to release things into the commons space. I've also brought one example. I'm a member of the American Outlaws Sioux Falls chapter, and that is the group of soccer fans that support the national team, both men and women's. And this is actually kind of a scarf, and every chapter has a scarf. And so on one side it says Sioux Falls, and they chose the design on the other side, and I actually had nothing to do with choosing this, even though I'm a member of the organization. So you can actually kind of see they've taken elements from the proposed Sioux Falls flag and incorporated into this. And I think that's really cool because these are bought from cities. I mean, if you go to the local chapter bar where people go to watch the games, you'll see close to 100 flags or scarves from around the rest of the city, or I'm sorry, around the rest of the country. And so we have other people in other municipalities trading these, bringing them around. So this design is getting around in a number of ways. That was just one that I found really, really interesting. And that's pretty much what I've got.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else from the group? Zach, did you want to, or?
I'll speak here and then Zach will follow up. My name is, well, first, thank you for hearing our words today. My name's Kelsey Thomas. I live within the Rose Hill edition of Sioux Falls. It was in 2016 that I was looking into printing one of the Sioux Falls flags, knowing that my partner and I were choosing this city to invest in by buying our first home. The presidential election had passed and Sioux Falls had just seen the building collapse downtown, and I thought that the flag would be a perfect way to claim this city. It is in these moments of trauma and division that we must rely on one another in our community to endure, to survive. I walked in the Women's March that year, flying one of the first printed unofficial Sioux Falls flags as a sign of unity and strength in our city. I wholeheartedly believe that change starts with a one-on-one conversation, and that real hope for day-to-day impact happens in a grassroots manner. It happens in cities, it happens in communities. There's been a lot of grassroots action, a lot of groundwork, time, energy, and intention put towards this flag. With over 90 flag designs, submissions, and over 3,000 votes in 2014, this flag was chosen for its careful design and representation. By vexillological standards, it's one of the best out there, and walking through, for instance, the Chicago airport, it stands out. It's beginning to be traded. It's getting around there. I love that the red on there represents kind of Quartzsite, and the yellow reminds me of the seal on our state flag, but also our beautiful Sunshine State. There are plenty of topics out there to divide people, but this is an important symbol that we can all claim and call our own. It is a way for us to have pride in our city and build community. I love that this flag has driven conversation since 2014 and continues to be spread in forms of t-shirts and patches, and there's even quite a few people walking around with tattoos. We are here because the flag has been building power since 2014, power that the people of Sioux Falls have and want to express for the pride that they have in this city. I urge you to adopt this flag and help make this unofficial movement an official one. And I hope that when I go on my honeymoon this fall to Germany, that I could travel to our sister city in Potsdam and deliver an official Sioux Falls flag. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Hello, I'm Zach DeBoer. So I usually like to be a little bit more prepared than I am right now. I just had my first daughter be born like 3 days ago, 3.5. I don't really know. I haven't slept a lot. It's a bit of a blur. But it maybe goes to show this is a very important topic to me. Am I using my newborn daughter to persuade you to be on board for this? Yes. But, so I've been involved, I guess, in this discussion tangentially, I guess, from the initial 2014 contest to now. And so I can kind of give a little bit of background or an expedited version of how the flag came to be. And then if any of you had questions, I'm kind of a know-it-all on this very specific niche subject. So up on the board there, those are the 90 different submissions that were, or flag designs that were submitted for the contest. The contest kind of spun out of a creative conference called ODA in 2014. They had brought in a speaker by the name of Roman Mars. He's the host of a very popular podcast called 99% Invisible. It's a podcast about design, and that can mean flags, it can mean architecture, it can mean like fortune cookies. So it's a very, it's an eclectic podcast, well known. He did a TED Talk actually about flag design from his flag episode, and it has like 5 million views, worth a watch. I think I've sent it around to a couple people. But he came and did that same podcast presentation in Sioux Falls at the Sioux Falls Pavilion that year, and noted that Sioux Falls is indeed one of 3 of the 250 most populous cities in the United States that doesn't actually have a city flag. So a lot of folks maybe don't even know their own city does have a flag. Rapid City has a flag. Hermosa has a flag. Spearfish, and recently Brandon. I can touch on that one later if needed. So there are a handful of flags that actually do exist in South Dakota for specific cities. But 250 most populous cities, there are 3 that don't. Hilo, Hawaii, Fargo, North Dakota, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The design community and a bunch of different individuals thought, hey, that's ridiculous. We deserve, a great city deserves a great flag. So a group of the folks that put on that conference, AIGA, which is the American Institute of Graphic Arts, they're a graphic design organization. They've been around for like 100 years. The local chapter of that, the Sioux Falls Design Center, and maybe some other ones. Got together, put together this contest, put out a call. 90 submissions were received, and those submissions kind of vary. Is this mic able to turn on that I can do a little bit of pointing and talking, or can you hear me? Cool, thank you, appreciate it. Oh, sitting is so much better. As we kind of look around here, obviously, here's the winning flag. Each person was allowed 2 submissions, so there's most likely that person's other flag. That one's pretty great. That one was mine. And so is that one. Oh, really good. Some of these flags do kind of fit within what are known as like good flag design. T. Denny maybe not as much. These are the submissions that were submitted. And one other little bonus, this one here was actually submitted by an 8-year-old. She did a colored, like a crayon drawing, and then somebody recreated that for her in an image. When that contest happened, there was an online forum, SurveyMonkey, 90 submissions, and you ranked them 1 to 5. It took about half an hour to get through the thing. Or plus, if you were really, looking at it. So over 3,000 votes were cast in that. That's a big time commitment, a big number of people. In the end, I believe there were six of these flags that made it to the top 6, and then there was a final public vote again in that same format. This was one of them. This was one of them. The 8-year-old girls was one of them, and obviously this one and some other one. Again, it's been a bit. Those top 6 were then voted on by the public. The winning flag was the one that we're all wearing. And separately from that, there was a panel of experts in flag design and design that were assembled and looked at the finalists and as a group selected a winner. So that panel included Roman Mars, the podcaster who spoke on the topic originally. I think members of AIGA's South Dakota chapter, maybe a couple of university professors from USC, SDSU, art professors, and as well as Ted Kay. And Ted Kay is the president of the North American Vexillological Association. Vexillology is the study of flags. Sorry. Anyway, I'm hearing things. Apologize. So Ted Kay, in the world of flag design, a pretty big name. So they all came together and also unanimously voted this design as the best design based on the 5 rules of flag design. I'd be happy to lay those out for you if you wanted. But after this vote, there was, yes, efforts to bring the flag to an official vote. And that's kind of where we've come. I just explained those details just to kind of show that this flag was vetted through a very democratic process, a very open and democratic process, and has been slowly gaining momentum on its own since those initial pushes in 2014 and then 2016. I was, like I said, tangentially involved. My wife made the website, SiouxFallsFlag.com, for that group. I helped write emails to council members, those sort of things. And then after 2016, we kind of just let those things go, and we found others picked up that ball, started to produce flags and T-shirts and all these things. And, knocking on doors this past campaign season, I started to see it everywhere, and it was exciting. It felt like this unifying image, this unifying shape that that Sioux Falls was adopting as its own. I'll maybe stop there because I feel like I'm rambling. But if you have other questions on this, or if you would like to know about good flag design, I'll also note that I work for the South Dakota Arts Council and do residencies, week-long residencies in schools and different organizations. And my project that I do is actually designing a city flag for your city. So I've done that with K through 12 graders in Dual County, in Brandon, in Millbank, and it's a really fun, engaging project. So I know a lot about flags, so I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have on this.
Thank you, Mr. DeVore. Sleep deprivation is one of those things we all get through as that childbirth process, so you'll survive, or most do. Questions. One of the things that I wanted to do before we started this discussion is in the disclosure process, both Councilor Erickson and myself have been working with the City Attorney's Office, with Mr. David is the council staff, and we're the ones that have brought this forward today, just for everyone to to understand kind of where we're at in this process. And I know Mr. Weber did a presentation to the council a number of years back after the contest, and it kind of fell by the wayside, and it's one of those things that Councilor Erickson and I felt that needed to be resurrected, and that's why we're here today talking about this, as well as the community support for this project and asking us to consider making this design an official flag of the city of Sioux Falls. So with that, questions. Councilor Neitzert.
Thank you, Councilor Starr. So my first question would be, when we talk about adopting a Sioux Falls flag, what mechanically does that mean? Can anybody answer that as far as the city goes? Is that a resolution? Is it an ordinance? What would that look like?
Councilor Starr and Erickson are working on a resolution. It would just be a resolution to adopt the flag. You would have the flag as an attachment to that resolution. It only takes one reading as it's a resolution, so that's the action that would be necessary for adoption.
Okay, and I don't know if this is a question for the city attorney or who, but would this impose any cost, liability, requirement, whatever it may be, and onto the city going forward that we would want to be aware of?
The question that I can answer is the requirement to place the flag. As the resolution is currently drafted, it does not require that the flag be placed at certain locations. It would just simply adopts the flag. This is the official flag of the city of Sioux Falls. The other questions I'd have to defer on to the city attorney's office.
Sure, and it looks like there's a waiver of rights, so it looks like it would be basically like, public domain, so anybody could, I would assume anybody could reproduce the flag. Everybody would be free to sell it in their stores. There would be no exclusive. It wouldn't be one person making the money off of it. Whoever would like to address that, like what is this mechanically gonna mean, I guess?
That means that anyone in the world can reproduce it, and including the original artist, he's released all copyright to it. There's a few levels of the Creative Commons. There's the one where, the basic level where you retain, like if I made something and I wanted everyone to be able to use it, but I still wanted to own it, he's gone beyond that. He has released it completely. And it's the reason that, and we've reclarified that recently, but that is the reason that it's been sold at Maximum Promotions, many places downtown, the Design Center, and no one's had any type of legal jeopardy.
Legal claims.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the cost, the council made a promise, the council, the people behind the push, we've said that if the city wants to fly this outside of the official buildings, they don't have to, but if they would like to, at least for the first run, we would be happy to accept the cost of production for those flags.
Okay, but obviously it's since it's essentially open source, however you want to put whatever term you used. Essentially, the city can print it with whatever printer they want. They can fly it as much as they want, as little as they want, and anybody in the city can have it printed if they know a printer on a T-shirt, on a flag, whatever it may be. It's been given for anybody to use to their liking.
I've gotten to know this process far more than I ever had wanted to recently. That's exactly how I understand it, and that's how I've been advised also.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Staley.
Did I hear right? This started in 2014? Okay, and the vote happened in 2016?
I don't believe there was ever any vote. I think it was just an effort to bring it to.
But you said 3,000 people voted.
Oh, sorry, the vote to adopt the flag. Sorry, I thought you were talking down to council. But yes, the vote happened in 2014. Maybe 4 or 6 months after that.
Let me, and I do not want to make you angry in any way, shape, or form.
There's a lot of us, and we're all in the same
yes,
uniform.
but I came on the council in 2016, and this was not an issue we ever addressed. But I know there's been talk, and this is to me maybe there's two questions. The first question was, should we have a city flag? And the second question is, should it be this city flag? Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, sure.
And so a group took it forward on themselves and said, well, here are the choices. And by the way, I'd like to, do we have a copy of that, Jim? Those flags? That was kind of interesting.
I can send you a picture.
Okay. So the question comes back to, and I'm all for a city flag, but I did post this on Facebook, you know, when it came out in the Argus, and I think I got like 180 comments, and it was pretty powerful. So there seems to be, like, maybe, would you ever be open, and this is a lovely design, but I mean, we're talking, it's been a few years, if we were going to say, I mean, we've got lots of people coming to town, would you ever be open to saying, if we decide this, we want to do this, that we could maybe redo the competition?
Have another vote?
Yes.
Well, I can say you certainly could. I think
mean, where it would be, where the city would be maybe more involved, because my understanding is you did this apart from the city council's blessing, correct? And then you brought it to the city council.
I don't know if we needed the blessing, but yes, it was not, the city was not involved in that process. It was something that was evolved from various groups, and we'll call it a grassroots effort.
Right, it was kind of, and Councilor Starr has been one of your biggest advocates because he has it right on his email. Every time you get an email from the guy, there's the flag. It's
you know who he works for.
Yeah. So I'm just throwing this out that I'm saying. I mean, if my colleagues would all say yes, this is it, and we're going to vote on it, then I get that. But I do think that there would be probably more of an embrace in the community if we said, well, that happened then, and maybe we could revisit it and just kind of look at the ideas and resubmit ideas and in a fresh way, and then the city would be embracing it. So I
understand your question. I'll address it if you like. Leading up to that contest and leading up, you know, during the voting stage, there was significant amount of press. There was, you know, a write-up in the Argus. There was, you know, online talk of it on blogs like The Gist and some of the. If you go to SiouxFallsFlag.com, you can look at a nice layout of links and press coverage from it, leading up to that vote. So there was a engagement and there was publicity and there was talk. I think if you wanted to do that all over again, your results would end up being the same thing, because let's say we open it up again. Obviously, this one would be submitted amongst those things, yes. The new submissions of flags. The fact that this flag has already been obviously adopted by large amounts of people, that vote's going to still end up being this one. And I don't think you're going to find that kind of unity and that kind of wide support on the 20, 100, 10 other designs that might come out from that process. And at the end of the day, I love that you engage, ask people about that on your Facebook, and I was able to see comments and see how people are reacting to it. I may have lost the thread there. Hold on.
You like that they're engaging? And
yes. So people are engaging. You're never going to have a design that anyone, you could change that flag to any other flag in your post, and those same people would have commented in the same kind of way. They would have had little changes, and why isn't the red more pink if it's pink? Why?
And why don't you explain to what those
colors? I will do that, yes. And I'll just finish up. A camel made by, or a horse made by committee is a camel. A lot of cooks in the kitchen. You're never going to be able to formulate something that appeases everybody. But yeah, so the symbolism. So there is we're referring to it as red, but if you really look at it on the Pantone colors, which a full download with official Pantone colors, print version, a online version. Again, my wife's a graphic designer, so there we go, thank you, beautiful. Has these things on here. It is very vibrant. Well, it's red in the sense that the inside of a watermelon is red, right? So it is a very vibrant red. The red does stand for the quartzite that surrounds our community. The blue represents the water, but also the sky, and also a reference to the South Dakota flag. And the yellow sun is taken directly from that South Dakota flag, formerly the Sunshine State. And the three ascending lines, zigzag lines, represent the falls, but also Sioux Falls' upward progression as a community. It's packed with wonderful symbolism that when you see this, you can break down those things really fast, and it's just such a punchy graphic that is just, there's a reason that so many experts, and the general public gravitated towards this one.
Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Kiley.
Just a quick question. Since this is open to anybody to utilize, any citizen in the city of Sioux Falls, there's also nothing preventing city of Del Rapids or somebody else from adopting the same flag as their city flag. What could the city of Sioux Falls do to protect itself if they decided they were going to make this their official flag?
Beyond going to war with Del Rapids. Honestly, if we wanted to write some, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't think there's going to be another city who sees a flag that's already representing somebody and goes, I want that. I mentioned I work for the South Dakota Arts Council and do residencies. In February of last year, did a week-long at Robert Bennis Elementary, worked with the K through 5 or K4, every student we did, learned about the 5 elements of good flag design. We learned about symbolism and what symbolism is, and how colors can represent things, how shapes can represent things, and each kid designed their own flag. Simultaneously, I spoke to their city council about the topic and asked if they would support an effort to do a vote or open it up to the public. They agreed, opened it up, and we actually kind of ran through that whole process, and Brandon adopted their own. So it's one of those projects, it's one of those things that no one's going to want to borrow somebody else's or take over somebody else's. Everybody, every city wants their own voice. So I think, I don't think it's going to be an issue that we'll run into.
Okay, I'm not so sure.
Okay.
I've learned long ago. I like the concept, but I've learned long ago not to make assumptions because you're always surprised.
Right.
Frequently you're surprised. But again, coming back to my question, would it be possible for the city of Sioux Falls, because I see on your T-shirts it does say City of Sioux Falls. Mm-hmm. If we were to adopt it as it is on the T-shirt and we wanted to do something to protect that, would we be able to do so?
You maybe would be, but I would recommend against it. Flags are one of those kind of free source things that shouldn't belong to anybody, but should represent everybody.
Well, especially if there's an artist that's invested his or her time in producing this and is making it available to everybody. And believe me, I'm very cognizant of that. My son is an artist, and that's how he makes his living. So you would hate to... At one point, you'd hate to make assumptions that it's not going to happen. At the other time, you'd hate to take advantage of somebody who's invested and made this offer to the city of Sioux Falls.
I think that's nice to consider and good to hear as an artist. Love it. But I'll say that's why his name is Max Rabkin. That's why he did release it to the Creative Commons, and that's why he felt comfortable, letting his baby go and letting it go off on its own and find its own way to the top of a flagpole.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And just one thing to add, he did release it titled as the Sioux Falls flag.
Okay, so very good. Thank you.
Councilor Neitzert.
So yeah, this is a question for anybody out there. The other, and I'm just going to throw this out as an open question for our attorneys as well, not to answer now, but this is what I would want to know from them. I always want to get stuff like this when I don't understand what the ramifications are, some legal advice. What other jurisdictions have done as far as, do they do anything to protect their flag, or is it just another Creative Commons thing like this? And is there merit to trying to do something to protect what you have, just like somebody that has a corporation and might have a logo, might have some sort of a copyright on that so that it's not used for purposes they may not like that would denigrate it. Obscene purposes, for example, are used in some way that they didn't encounter. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that, but that's what I would be asking our attorneys most likely, is what do they think about the idea?
And I'm sure that they could follow up with more detail, but to the best of my knowledge, major cities like Denver and Chicago, you'll see those flags be able to be reproduced in pretty much any form. So it would stand to reason that they are not protecting those as copyrights.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else want to ask any other questions? All right, then I'm going to do oh, I'm sorry. Did you jump in? We're pretty informal this afternoon, so that's great. Just introduce yourself and.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to come up today. My name's Joe Schaefer. I'm a graphic designer. I run a studio here in town, just opened recently, actually. I was part of the crew that helped support the flag design and some of the vectorizing of some of the elements, making sure they're scalable. There's some things, well, one, we could reach out to more of those larger cities and ask them some of the provisions that they've made within the elements of their flag. A lot of times what we do as graphic designers, if we do create some sort of corporate identity or a mark for a company, we create a logo standard for them, a brand standards, if you will, for that mark, how it's used, where it can be used, basically all the context around that. So one discussion we could have, whether we want to bring that designer in that created this flag and their thoughts, we could talk about making some provisions in terms of the combinations of all of these elements together. And then specifically, we've already established colors for each of those elements within the flag. So we can talk about specifically the production of this flag using the elements with this specific color. So there could be some sort of loopholes, some parameters that we make regarding the context of all of these specific elements coming together into one conjunction that might help try to alleviate anyone that wants to come in and just steal the flag. I mean, because there are a limited amount of elements, you might see, or I could see something happening where if someone did really like the flag, they could change the colors of them, keep the design, change the colors. So you could see that happening. That's not extremely common, but you do see it happen every once in a while. So one thing we could do is keeping it open source to allow everyone to reproduce in all those things, but put provisions on the particular elements in conjunction with that flag to sort of eliminate the possibility of someone trying to steal it, essentially. So that's sort of a balance we can create. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Did anyone else have anything? I'll take my turn. That is the hardest part about this chair, is waiting till the end to throw in that discussion. I think that's the great thing that we've done this afternoon is I think Councilor Kiley made a really great point that, you know, it's our symbol and the last thing we would want is for someone to reproduce it in a way that isn't acceptable, and making sure those protections are there. One of the things we spent a lot of time doing between the city attorney's office with Attorney Brown was making sure that it was open source, and we've kind of been working the opposite direction towards making it available for everyone to reproduce and that it becomes part of the community. It's interesting that really came out this afternoon for me is that we also need to look at the other side of it, making sure that we're protecting our brand as a city. And I think that's key to however we move forward with this process. So this meeting's been really good to drive that point home that there's more than one way to look at where we're at. So, and I know Councilor Erickson feels similarly. I hate speaking for her because she does a great job of speaking for herself, but I think we wanted to at least bring this discussion to the community and look at moving forward, because we've obviously from 2014 to this point, we've talked about it in a number of ways, and it's time to get some direction. And as we see it be reproduced around the community more and more, it's kind of taken its own process through expanding and growing, and it's been kind of a little bit of a rebel flag as it's grown through the community as well, and it's been adopted, and I think it represents our community really well. The other thing I wanted to address were design contests. I hate them. I work in marketing myself, and it always is scary when you turn that over to people who aren't graphic artists and don't have a lot of history with design and some things. And so putting those safeguards in place really respected the process too as well, to make sure that we came up, that you all were able to come up with something that was acceptable and meets the criteria of good flag design. And I think we have that. Would I make changes? Yeah, I'd want the red to be a different color, and we all do that. And I think Mr. DeBoer did a nice job of pointing that out, that once you start tweaking things and you turn it over to a committee, we end up with our camel. And I think we have a horse, and I think it's a really fine-looking horse. So that ends my comments as part of this process. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being so well dressed. We greatly appreciate that. We have one more item on our agenda this afternoon, item D. Mr. David, if you would, if you'd kick us off and get us started with item D, please.
Good afternoon. Jim David, the Operations Manager for the City Council. Earlier this year, the South Dakota Legislature did approve House Bill 1172. That new law requires that every official meeting of the public body reserve a time for public comment. A working session was held by this body last month to determine how to implement this new law. The results of this meeting were reviewed with the Operations Committee last week with no changes. Within your handout, you'll find this proposed policy as an amendment to page 4 of the Procedures Manual. As recommended during the working session, the policy differentiates between two types of meetings: the special meetings and then all other non-regular meetings, such as your budget hearings, your informationals, your council task force, and working sessions. If we look at the special meetings, the council can call a special meeting with the consent of at least 6 council members. These meetings in the past have dealt with topics such as the Transit Freedom Pass and also the Golf Course Management Contract. The policy formulated at the previous working session had recommended that the public comment be allowed after the staff's or sponsor presentation, but before the council discussion or voting. Similar on how a resolution and ordinance are handled during a regular meeting. And then each speaker would be allowed 5 minutes. For all those other non-regular meetings, public comment would be allowed at the end of the agenda with a minimum of 15 minutes set aside and 5 minutes per speaker. Any public comment must relate to the agenda topics. There's also requests for a couple statements to be added to this policy, and one that the council values input from citizens, and if time allows, the 15-minute minimum should be expanded by the chair. And then if time allows, the council may ask the chair to extend the public comment period when the information addresses a complex issue or the topic requires specialized knowledge. Unless there are any objections to this as currently laid out in front of you, and I apologize for leaving up that little box there, unless there are objections, a resolution will be brought forward next week for your consideration to amend the Procedures Manual. There was just one more item that was added at the Operations Committee, and that's just a clarification on the travel policy that it does cover both council staff and city council members, and that the suggested travel is out of the Sioux Falls Regional Airport. But we can address that later, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
Councilor Neitzer?
I just want to clarify for everyone, in case there was any wonder about the travel policy, what that really came out of is there was just a question from the auditors as to what policy they should use, because our manual was really silent, and so when they were booking travel last time, there was just a question of, do I use the city policy or do I use the council policy? Because there's a couple of provisions that were slightly different, and that gave them different options, and so it's just basically a cleanup just to clarify for the audit staff, just so everybody is on the same page going forward with different chairs, what travel policy they should use. So it's just a cleanup, essentially.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Brecky.
I should have brought this forward before. At the last sentence, it said, if time allows, the council may ask the chair. I'm wondering if that, instead of council there, that should be public body. Because earlier up there, we're referring to all of the different bodies that this is going to apply to, not just the city council, but informational, task force, working session meetings. We talked about committees in there as well, like planning committee, park board. That kind of
This policy would only apply
This just
to
applies to the
city
council.
council entities. And from my understanding, the administration is currently working on a policy that addresses the park board and other groups within the administration side.
Then it's perfectly appropriate the way we've got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything to questions or concerns? With that, we've come to the end of our agenda. Thank you.
Amen.